ones, right? So this was kind of a carryover from last year, and last year I was not involved with the ILMS curriculum at all, so I kind of learned along the way this year. I worked mostly with I guess I worked completely with Haley separate from Gidget because their programs are very different and both had their own numerous numbers of grade levels to work with anyway. So yeah, their previous curriculum documents were very much all literacy based and very light on the technology skills. And now with these 2017 literacy information and technology standards, it's kind of the opposite direction. There's no specifically literacy standards involved, and it's all the technology and information systems. So we had some major overhauling to do. I think Haley and Gidget would both agree that it was kind of a start from scratch process. And so Haley and I, since I'm looking at Haley here first, she basically organized the content and I helped her kind of align the standards and put it into the format that we were looking for. And so I invite Haley to add anything else that she wants to share about her curriculum, but I think it was really just like we keep saying, the process of going through it helped me understand the standards and what they do in library better. And I think it was fun to watch Haley kind of plug things in where they made sense and really go through what she truly wanted each grade level to know through at the end of each month of library. Anything you want to add, Haley?
No, you're doing great. It was nice for me to go through too, because I did, obviously you did a lot of the plugging in of the actual standards, but it helped me to know the standards a lot better. And like you said, how opposite it is from years previous, where it's heavy on technology now.
And so Haley did still keep many literacy learning targets in there, even though her actual library standards really don't have anything to do with literacy anymore. But we still want kids to go to the library and learn literacy and library skills along the way too. So it's an integration of all things library and media. And I don't know if Gidget is here yet, or if she's planning on joining, but I can speak to the work she did a little bit too. Did you want to stop and chat about Haley's part first before I talk about the older grades?
Well, I just found it actually quite refreshing to see how integrated everything is in the bottom, how you're cross what one person is doing, and not just in this curricular area, but in other curricular areas too, how you're utilizing and reaching different standards and benchmarks all over the place, actually. So that was fantastic. I also like that there's a focus now, more so, I believe, in teaching how to research, gather multiple resources when you're trying to use technology, validating technology, safety of technology. So I really appreciated all the information that's being presented all the way K through 8. Thank you.
And so in the elementary, Haley, or the library program has, I guess this year a little different with our shortened day, but typically kids would have an hour a week. Is that right, Haley? Of dedicated library time. And this year the schedule is shifted. So it's about 40 minutes a day for a full week. At the middle school, it's about half that amount of time. So the number of standards or the number of learning targets is quite reduced for each grade level, just because I believe they go with their ELA class every other week for a library session, something about like that. I guess, Haley, you were there. Is that about what it was when you were in the middle?
Yeah, that's what it was. I don't know if Gidget still does that, but yeah, that's what we did.
And is Gidget here yet? Otherwise I'll keep talking. Gidget had, her process was very similar. She had sketched out what her September A lesson was and her September B lesson was. So basically 2 library and technology lessons a month. And she also had included an extra lesson because some months there might be 3 sessions in a month. So that's why once you get to grades 5 through 8, the number of learning targets and standards is reduced because just there's a limited amount of time or a shorter amount of time that they have available to actually attend a dedicated library and technology class. So that was my process with those 2. Very similar, just the standards definitely get a little more complex, but it is interesting to look at how Wisconsin standards are laid out now with the newly released ones, is that in almost every subject they do build on the content that was presented at the band before it. So you can look at one of the 8th grade or 6th through 8th grade standards and trace it back to something that Haley might have done with kindergarten or 1st graders, just at a more basic level. So it'll be neat to see how as we move through these more developed curriculum plans, how kids really do have more of those skills already to build on, and it's a lot more cohesive that way. Any questions about ILMS? Otherwise, I know Angie had sent out a few just clarifying questions about the other bits and pieces I had shared in the folders there. Okay, well, should I just go on to Angie's questions next?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to say, yeah, the library and InfoTech especially, very easy to read. Like as a parent, I would go in, know exactly what's going on, know what's expected, be able to help my child. So I really appreciate that from the parent view, that they're not overly, technical in terms of the vocabulary or things that I wouldn't understand as a person who doesn't teach that subject. So I thought they were really great. So thank you all for your work on that.
Part of the process, because the standards themselves can be very hard to process even when you are involved in that subject every day. And so part of going through it, like with Haley, is kind of decoding. We call it unpacking the standards to find out what actually does that mean and what do I actually do that would make more sense to put as that learning target that is more understandable to anyone reading the document rather than just the standards language. So that, yes, that was definitely a focus of the creation of these maps, to make them user friendly. And so I'm glad for that feedback, that they were understandable.
Well, also, they build, like you said, and you can just see what the expectation is year from year to year. And we didn't always have that. And I just think everybody needs to know this is the expectation of what kids need to know in kindergarten, 1st grade, and they just keep building on one another. So it was great. Thank you for all your time and effort to put it together. Thank you.
So a couple of the other things, and I think, were there any other questions for Haley before Haley logs off? Unless you want to stay, Haley, the other things aren't really related to library. The other questions Angie brought up were about, one of the other thoughts was we had approved last summer, or at the end of the spring last year, the high school updated ELA curriculum. And there's a bit of a discussion around this, and I reached out to Vicki because on our side at school, we were a little we had mixed understandings of what we were supposed to update for this spring's curriculum committee. And so Vicki came back and shared that you also thought that some assessment development was needed. And Kevin Hennessy, who had written it originally, and I talked about it further. And so he kind of shared his thoughts on that. He had understood, his understanding was that he needed to add the standards, like the written out, not just the coded standards, but the sentences of the standards at the bottom. And his understanding was the assessments as presented were as thorough or as complete as they would be. So that's why he submitted a bit of a summary of how this year was different, and further developed, I guess, gave some more examples or some more bits of those assessments. They didn't add anything to the actual document, because as they presented it last year is truly what they went through this year, and even kind of in a more limited fashion, just based on the amount that they were able to teach this year. But he hopes that his explanation and his other documents of the criteria or the options for assessment were something that would be more helpful for you to understand what their assessments are like in the high school ELA.
Angie, did you have any additional questions about that from what we talked about?
What it was last year, if you look through the assessments, they were all the same in the when it came out, and what was shared by Jason was that just like what you said, Krista, that they really hadn't worked through it yet and didn't exactly know what was going to take place. And then also we're wanting all of the documents, Krista, to be just like what you presented for technology, where in it might have the number, but to a parent or someone else to just look at the number, that's meaningless information. Mm-hmm. So having that number in the boxes is great, but at some point within the document, like you have it at the end, where you have actually what the standard is. And so we want that with all of our every curricular area to be presented like you presented the technology one.
And I believe, aren't his written out standards listed at the bottom of the ELA ones now? Okay. Yeah. And I just pulled up one of them to double check it, and that one had it on there. Okay. So,
but it was more the assessments, just because what happened, I'm going to go back in time here a long, long time ago. It would have test, quiz, handout, test, quiz, handout. And we said, I don't know if you remember this, Vicki, or not, we said, if that's actually what you're doing in class, that is the most boring class I have ever attended. And I know you're doing more than that. So we want to know what you're doing, not every single thing, but it has to be more than that, I hope. And then the other piece was writing. We know we need to work on our writing skills. So what type of assignments or assessments are you doing in that area? And that was, once again, across all curricular areas as well. Even in physical education, they started doing things with letters in kindergarten during Phi-Ed and things like that, and numbers to try to help in the area of math and in reading and the alphabet. Mm-hmm. So that's just one small example, but just trying to expand writing and what that rubric looked like and moving forward, which the rubric has been defined now. And so hopefully that's helpful to staff in order to teach. I was actually, I just got this editorial, and it was talking about students and them applying for college and what colleges are looking for. And students try to create something unique. And one of the best ones that they got this year was a student talking about pulp being in their orange juice at home or not having pulp in their orange juice at home. And it was an actual debate that the family has on a regular basis about who likes pulp and who doesn't like pulp. And this kid got into Harvard because of a pulp, non-pulp essay. And it was how he wrote it, how it affected his life, the closeness of his family. And so writing is really important, and we're really wanting to try to incorporate that.
So I did notice on our former documents that writing was indicated, or there were parts where it was highlighted. And I guess the ones that I worked through, we haven't made that a focus. But that is something still that you as the board, as the curriculum committee would like kind of highlighted or just considered as an assessment or like
an expectation
in every content area.
Vicki, do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I felt like we went away from making it a highlighted thing to just, an expectation. Like, we know we need to focus on that. We need to include it in our documents, but we don't need to call it out.
Okay.
You don't have to have a W beside it.
Okay, yes.
That's what it was, but we just want to know that they are writing in every academic area. It's important. I shouldn't say writing, typing,
Yes.
It's not necessarily with a pencil. And in the next curricular area, which we were talking about in social studies, I'm looking through it and it's absolutely fantastic. I love, the equity and what it's like in the other countries and where they're located. And it just fit right into, oh my gosh, you could write so much and compare and contrast. And so I don't know if they're doing that or not. It's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information.
It's a lot to cover. And that's why, once again, down below, when you have that crossover between English language arts and social studies, it's just a real natural transition to be writing and reading and in those subject areas so that you're covering all the points.
Yes. And I know, for example, Mr. Schneider at the middle school is focusing part of his in-service day on Friday on disciplinary literacy, not just so the core teachers are working on curriculum, but also the other specials and non-core subjects are digging back in and doing kind of a refresher and a discussion on ways to interweave those literacy practices within their course, within their subjects, which isn't always as obvious as within the core subjects.
So this is my husband. Jeff, say hello.
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 All right. Now say goodbye.
Goodbye. Have a nice meeting.
So something else with that, I know in the past, when there have been some experiences that I had with equity, for example, some students that were speaking negatively to another person because of the color of their skin, there were actually writing assignments and some research projects that went along with that, which they had to present. And I thought that was a nice thing.
And across multiple content areas, and not just necessarily in writing or just in social studies where you might study a particular culture or difference. Right. You asked about the social studies. Speaking of social studies, the only one I shared with you was grade 6, because they're along with asking for more assessment information, they just started adopting the new curriculum map at 6th grade this year. And then next year it'll be 6th and 7th using the new curriculum map. And then the following year will be all 3 grades. Because if we had switched everything to the new map in 1 year, then some of the students would be getting some of the content twice and some of the content not at all. So it had to be phased in. So Kara Gardner was the lucky one who got to do the new curriculum map with her 6th graders this year. And so she updated just a few things that she found in real time that she ended up doing with her 6th grade social studies groups.
So once again, if you don't mind adding to that calendar, what you'll add next year, then which grade you'll add next year in that content.
Oh, sure.
It just helps. It helps me to see it. You know, what are the expectations for that year? And I say that because we got behind in the past multiple years, and I just want to try to prevent that from happening if possible.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess one other thing, backing up to your ELA question about the assessments, is that DPI released newly revised ELA standards last spring, and Tom and I have talked about how that was perfect timing this year. But so even though the high school ELA we adopted their new curriculum map last spring and had adjustments this spring, the whole district ELA team is starting to look at these new standards, and hopefully there won't be major changes, especially at the high school, since they just rewrote their map, just modifying some of the standards language. Some of the other grade levels who haven't done them as recently, or the middle school and the elementary, may have some larger revisions to make, but those teams I will be working with building by building because they are in different situations. But everyone will have a chance to make some revisions, major or minor, in the next year.
And I think that's just key to keep reminding everybody that this is probably the most, living document, right, that we have in the district, because there's so much that is out of our control that we have to respond to. And then we also are constantly building up our current programming. And so when we look at this, it's a lot of hurry up and take your time sometimes, where it's like, we got to get this done here, but then, we've got to make sure that we're doing it correctly. And we're doing this process, because we can have the best intentions and completely throw spin our curriculum. But that's a great example with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade going on. You cannot flip an entire, K-12 curriculum on its head, because you're going to leave holes then that are just never going to be able to be touched after that. So every step, Krista is peeling back the layer of the onion and then finding 14 other things that she's got to fix within that, but she's doing a great job. So thank you, Krista.
So I know that you guys don't know some of this history, but we have had, I'm sorry to say, some teachers pass away. And part of this very thought out, whether they want to do it unit by unit or month by month as a committee, we didn't care. But what we did want to know is if somebody had to urgently step in, they could step in and somewhat see where that class was. And if all of the grades are the same, that's really helpful in those emergent situations. So that was part of what happened as well with us.
So that's all I have to present. Does anyone have any other questions?
I thought it was great. I really, really love the format that you're using. And this is the expectation for students. Any teacher can go to any grade and see what that is in that content area. I just think it's fantastic. And we all thank you very much for your time and effort. I can only imagine the amount of hours that go into it. So thank you.
And I'm finding just some feedback on that is that when someone has done it, and I've only done it a few times now, those who don't do it, like Haley and Gidget, it's just more comfortable to go through it with someone who has, and then it turns out to be kind of just almost fun or enjoyable to this isn't as intimidating or burdensome. it makes sense when they're not intimidated by the process itself, maybe, I guess is a way to put it. And I've really enjoyed all the groups I've worked with because you can have really good discussions with them. So thank you for letting me or letting someone have this position to kind of find some consistency among all of our curriculum documents, because I think in the end it will help it make a lot more sense and be more unified.
Well, and I think the one thing that has been helpful with that is, Krista, is that, you know, sometimes when you're doing the curricular process can almost be it's just not human sometimes, right? We're dealing with a lot of standards and you know and points, but we're not, you know, sometimes, you know, it's just a hoop that we have to jump through, and you're really not making it, you know, you're not allowing it to become that process because you're keeping the human side there, and you're having those relationship building moments with your staff right now, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you again, Krista.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you, Krista.